Thank you for joining us for today's event. Before we begin, I'd like, of course, to acknowledge that, well, all of us are meeting on different land of Indigenous people across Australia, so please pay respects to the land of the people that you are currently meeting on today. In fact, one of the nice things we often do is if you want to place the name of the people and their nation in the chat, it's a really nice way to us all pay mutual respect to where you are today. I'd like to pay respect to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I want to particularly pay respect to them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for the land upon which the university is built. And I happen to live quite close to the university, so I'm still on Gadigal land, even though I'm actually beaming in from home. My name's Verity Firth. I'm the Executive Director of Social Justice at UTS, where I lead up our Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion. It's my extreme pleasure to be joined today by some very distinguished guests, Professor Patrick McGorry, Georgie Harman and Josh Yasseri. I will have the chance to introduce them all properly shortly. But there is a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Firstly, the event is being live captioned. So to view the captions, you need to click on the link that's in the chat panel. You'll find it at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom control panel. The captions will open up in a separate window. If you have any questions during today's event, please type them into the Q&A box, which you'll also find in your Zoom control panel. Now, there will be an opportunity to ask questions, so that's really good. And there's also an opportunity to upvote questions. So if there's somebody else's question that you really think is a good one, upvote it. And on the whole, we take the most popular questions because often we run out of time. So if your question's popular, it's most likely to get asked. It's an online event, which means it's not always perfect. There may be technical issues, but we will work to resolve them quickly, so just keep patient. So today's event is the third and final in the Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion's The Future of Education Towards 2027 series. What we've been doing in this series is imagining what universities can do to make access to education equitable, as well as in a very difficult time, really. So how do you continue to have a focus on access and essentially the liberating part that is education in a time where we're weighed down by financial unease, changing social conditions and political unrest? October, as most people on this forum will know, is Mental Health Month. And as we approach the end of the year, it's a good time to consider the mental health impact that many have contended with over this year in the face of multiple overlapping crises. It's also a perfect time to look forward and imagine how we can do things better, and particularly for universities, better support our students so that they do more than just survive at university, they actually thrive. In early May, UTS staff rang students, specifically targeting students at risk of being impacted by COVID. So we rang students who were already accessing our wellbeing services, experiencing disability, students from low socioeconomic status backgrounds, students with asylum status, Indigenous and international students. And we rang them specifically to talk to them about the impacts of COVID-19 on their wellbeing, on their living conditions and on their financial security, so that we could talk to them, check in with them, but also direct them to the emergency support available from UTS and external services. Now, in that time, we phoned thousands of numbers, but we managed to speak directly to more than 700 students, and we heard some worrying statistics. We found out that of these students, 39% of them were concerned about their finances, 22% of them, so 1 in 5, thought they might lose their housing or were very worried about their housing security. 25% of these students said they were concerned or extremely concerned about how they were going to stay mentally healthy. And 16% said they didn't have anyone to support them during isolation. All concerning, right? And that was just a sample of 700 students at UTS. So 2020 has thrown up disruption and challenges that many students have not experienced in their lifetime. And it's not only a global pandemic that students are coming to grips with, it's a future of ongoing uncertainty and unrest, taking into account the climate crisis, the fight for equality against systemic racism and oppression, sweeping changes to the ways universities teach and run, and the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. At UTS, like many universities, we believe we are public purpose institutions. We pride ourselves on placing social justice at the heart of our priorities and our purpose. And this means we need to, particularly at this time, support our most vulnerable communities. So as we plan for the return to normal after COVID, how can we and other universities better support students' wellbeing and mental health? And particularly, how can we do it for those underrepresented communities who are disproportionately affected by these changes and who already face greater barriers to access and success at university? So to begin our discussion, it's my big pleasure to welcome Professor Patrick McGorry to deliver today's webinar, our keynote talk. Professor Patrick McGorry is the Executive Director of Orygen and a Professor at the Centre for Youth Mental Health at the University of Melbourne. He is also a Founding Director of Headspace. Professor McGorry is a world-leading researcher in the area of early psychosis and youth mental health, and his innovative research has played an integral role in the development of safe, effective treatments for young people with emerging mental disorders, notably the psychotic and severe mood disorders. Professor McGorry has published over 800 journal articles and book chapters and edited 9 books. He is a current president of the International Association of Youth Mental Health and past president of the Society for Mental Health Research and the Schizophrenia International Research Society. He has been a recipient of numerous awards, including the Australian of the Year in 2010. So welcome, Patrick. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Verity, and hi, everybody, and thanks for that lovely introduction and for the privilege of being part of this great webinar today and with colleagues as well. So I'm just going to talk for about 10 minutes, yeah, as you said in your introduction, I think there's huge concern about mental health and future of young people. Absolutely, they're one of the highest risk groups affected by the pandemic. They were already struggling prior to the pandemic in many ways. Just even one sort of piece of information, they're the one group, the emerging adults are the one group who have gone backwards financially in terms of security and security, I suppose is a good way of putting it, over the last decade. Everyone else has, been moving forward, especially people in my age group, greater security all the time, but the young people are really the ones that have been let down by society, I think, in many, many ways. And it's not surprising that we're seeing a rise in mental ill health in young people generally. And so maybe if I could just maybe share the screen, I want to talk about the university dimension to it, and got some information to share about that.
I think Fiona will be able to give you access.
Yeah, okay. Is that working? Can you see it? Yeah, great, thanks. Well, so this has been our mantra at Orygen and in youth mental health generally, globally, that making the point that mental ill health, broadly defined as the #1 threat to young lives and futures. It's the biggest threat to their lives and obviously increasingly the biggest threat to their futures. And we're talking about a broad sort of concept of mental ill health here as well. And the concept of mental wealth has been talked about a lot. It came from a British politician originally, writing in Nature, believe it. I think it's the first politician ever to be published in Nature. But he talked about this idea that you build up social capital as you move from early life into the threshold of adult life, and the 22-year-old is probably the maximum value to society of anyone in society. And if you think about this concept of social capital, because the society's invested so much in supporting the young person getting to that stage of independent life, and when they could be not just having a fulfilling life, but producing and contributing to society. And that was the slogan of the first National Mental Health Commission, contributing life. But if you become mentally ill, or if you underachieve in terms of your potential, even in a more subtle way, or if you end up on welfare or die from suicide, then clearly, it's a massive waste of human potential. So, and university students are probably at the pinnacle there, because they are the ones that have been, they've reached that stage when they can achieve, where their talents are actually being built upon, and they're ready to go. And if they sort of fall by the wayside at that point, or don't really flourish, then that's what this is all about anyway. And, you know, why do universities play an important role here? Because we did a project called Under the Radar. Orygen has a policy branch, like a think tank, which produces reports for the federal government. And then we basically, we do these in partnership with various organisations, and obviously all stakeholders contribute to this. And this was called Under the Radar. It was published, I think about 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. And it led to a university framework project, which was funded by the federal government, which I'm going to say a little bit about. So not all students are young, you know, but, you know, in Australia in 2016, you know, well over a quarter of a million students were under 25. And, you know, the access to tertiary education has increased greatly in recent years. So that you probably have a better idea than me, but I think it's about 40, 50% even that are actually able to access tertiary education, which is very different from, say, when I was in tertiary education. It's a much smaller percentage in those days. So, and this figure here, Georgie will have seen this many times before, but it's the incidence curve of mental ill health across the lifespan. And you can see that it's the mirror image of physical illness. You know, basically, physical illness strikes in little kids and in the over 50s in big numbers. And between puberty and even middle age, but certainly across this emerging adult period, physical illness is not a big deal these days. And even with COVID, you're seeing it. This age group is relatively protected from COVID, whereas the other age groups, particularly the older age group, is more vulnerable. So young people, physical health's never been better in human history, at least in high-income countries. And their mental health's never been worse. And there's lots of indicators, I haven't got time to show them, but the mental health of young people is actually getting a bit worse over recent 10, 15 years. And a lot of that is due to social determinants that I mentioned before, social economic sort of forces of various kinds. But nevertheless, we've got to do something about it. We've got to do preventive things, but we've got to actually respond to it. Yeah. So this might be of interest to people. There's a very good paper published last year in Lancet Psychiatry on this whole topic of student mental health care, which I don't know if maybe this is a bit undiplomatic, but it doesn't seem to have changed fundamentally from when I was a student, really, that the way it's actually been delivered on campuses. And that's what our university framework project was about, trying to stimulate some reform and you know, a review of how we're going about this issue. So this is the Under the Radar report, which I mentioned, trying to get this issue on the agenda. This is why we did it, and it certainly, I think, has succeeded in that respect. It's being talked about a lot more. There were several conferences held in the lead up to this about this topic, you know, which I went to a couple of them, and there was a lot of engagement of the relevant people. So what came out of this report was there's not enough data, there's not enough known about these issues actually. There have been some surveys which were worrying, this is pre-COVID, showing quite high levels of psychological distress, and that translates, you know, as Georgie knows, into a certain level of caseness, of need for care as well. So that it's not a direct measure of that, but you can extrapolate from that. The counselling services seem to be fairly oversubscribed, and, you know, only providing access to a very small percentage of the people who actually needed access. So they're kind of either at capacity or people are not help seeking, or a combination of the two. And the relationship of those services to the external mental health system, such as it is, you know, and obviously it's in crisis with Royal Commissions and productivity commissions anyway. I mean, it's really been, this came out of our project actually, that was a kind of almost like a finger pointing, who's really responsible for the mental health of these students? Is it the campuses, is it the universities, or is it the wider health system? And, you know, it's sort of like people taking a step backwards rather than a step forwards. So I won't go through all this. These are obvious things. You mentioned some of them, Verity, I think, in your introduction. The stresses that were already, you know, in place. I think the financial ones were very important. In Australia, students don't tend to move away from home to go to university as much as in say in Europe or in the US, but nevertheless, that's one factor, I guess, the support networks. And I suppose, you know, one of the challenges developmentally of becoming an adult in this transition period is sort of relinquishing or loosening ties with your family of origin and your scaffolding, you know, in the family sense, and actually trying to develop new support structures, new peer networks, new structures. I certainly still remember that when I was a student. You know, that's one of the key things, and some of the friends you make at that stage of your life, they're friends for life. So those sort of things are obviously all happening at the same time. But I think particularly with this kind of remote learning, that's become a real casualty of that, to be honest, that ability to, the social aspects of learning and education. So, you know, it's obviously a very important issue for universities and for the community to address the kind of risk to failure, to educational failure. We see this in high schools too. 50% of the people who develop a serious mental illness will have dropped out of high school. So, you know, there's an incredible loss of, what's the word, value for the society through this wastage of human potential, because we're not addressing one of the key undermining forces here. I'll go a bit more quickly because we're going to run out of time. So Ben Vaness, now a psychiatric registrar at the Alfred, did I think it was a Harkness Fellowship or one of those fellowships that allowed him to travel the world and look at what other countries were doing in relation to student mental health. And one of the problems was that the universities and the institutions themselves were not taking it seriously. They didn't even see it as a part of their duty of care, really, in many cases. And a bit like where high schools were 10 or 15 years ago, you know, when we're just educators. We don't do that. That's not we're not a health system. That's not our responsibility. But I think one of the things we've tried to say with this massive shift to becoming a business and a market, universities have got a duty of care more than ever before. They're making big profits out of, or they were, out of these students, and they haven't actually put systems in place to actually address their needs properly, and particularly the case with international students, which, you know, hopefully we can talk about. So this framework came out of this. Greg Hunt basically gave us a grant to conduct a process, you know, a collaborative process across the whole sector, which involved all the various stakeholders, including Universities Australia, and, you know, lots of other inputs, lived experience inputs. Other relevant organisations were involved in this process, and it was basically intended to come up with guidelines to address mental health and wellbeing, prevention strategies, but also trying to modernise and strengthen the whole, you know, service response, which was pretty inadequate, really. And obviously that's where I'm coming from. In particular, my career has been about helping to design and implement new models and new cultures of care that sort of provide much better access and much better holistic care for people compared to what we've been dealing with. And modernisation of these things is incredibly important, but also respecting the need for skill and expertise, which has been dumbed down a bit, I think, in recent times. Everyone thinks that mental health is just common sense these days, and they don't really understand the complexity and the skill sets that are really needed. So trying to get those different tiers or steps of care built in, and some great work in the UK. I had to review some research grants in the UK last week, and there were several projects there, very sophisticated UK approaches to this issue. And there's an organisation called Student Minds that was set up in the UK, which was had a very positive effect in a peer sort of sense. So I won't go through. These are just the sort of the standard slides from this project, so I won't go through them. There's no time, but this was a serious process. It's gone on for a year or two. It's about to produce its final report, which has been, you know, approved by the various stakeholders. It's very inclusive. There was a student voice, obviously. Some of the emerging themes were, you know, listed on this slide here, and I think going back to Ben's comment, there's got to be leadership from the highest levels of universities as well as from the grassroots. And one thing I think, you know, having grown up in the period of student activism in the 1970s, you know, the student voice and the student's power needs to be unlocked here, I think, so that they secure a better deal for themselves in this process. That's another thing that I think, you know, these days is probably needs more attention. These are obviously all relevant sort of aspects of the problem. This came for all the different discussions and focus groups and so on. And so in summary, all it really is a sort of a high level document. It doesn't really come up, I don't think, with clear enough solutions. And what we need now is a new phase of, I suppose, innovation and testing and trying to sort of develop new approaches, new models, and trying to make universities more connected. And obviously with COVID, I haven't got this slide here, but there's lots of data sources now showing that the level of distress and need for care in students, including some of our own modelling, has actually gone up dramatically since COVID, since the pandemic. For example, a Headspace survey showed that 77% of young people felt that their mental health had suffered as a result of during the pandemic, and we're certainly seeing surges of self-harm and emergency department presentations. I'm sure Georgie's got lots of data on this too. So it's one of the very high-risk groups. Students are particularly vulnerable, and particularly international students, I'd say as well. The disruption to education and employment in this age group is very, very significant, probably going to get worse. And the modelling from Ian Hickey's group in Sydney showed that it's actually a major driver of suicide risk in the coming years. So far, fortunately, we don't seem to have seen that completed suicide rate rise yet, although there is a bit of a trend in young men that we've seen from the Victorian coroner. But, so we've got time to act in a broad sense. And students are incredibly important here. At an international level, Universitas 21, which is one of the kind of football leagues of universities, has actually taken some leadership on this and have produced a policy statement about declaration on student mental health. So that's another vehicle for sort of getting more high-level action. These are the universities involved in that process. And Orygen, and I'm sure others, I've been working with international students. We've got some funding to sort of try to understand their needs a bit better and try to mobilise in an advocacy sense some better responses. So, now Batyr is another organisation that's relevant in this space. They started off in high schools, but they've now broadened onto university campuses, and it's a peer support sort of model. I think that's another great partnership and another great focus to actually involve there. So that was a bit of I'll just unshare. That's a bit of a slightly disorganised Cook's tour of the area, but just to flag that we are very, very concerned about this group. It's a very high priority for Orygen, and I'm sure for Headspace as well, and the youth mental health sector generally. We're looking for innovation, looking for partnerships and ways to kind of reinvent this whole area in the coming years. And it's obviously a perfect storm happening around universities right now. So whether that's a favourable environment, it's certainly an authorising environment for action. And I'll stop there. Thanks, Verity.
Thank you very much for that, Patrick. That's a really wonderful opening, and I've scribbled down a whole lot of issues that I want to explore with you. But I'm going to move just to our other panelists now and bring the conversation back. I'm particularly interested in what you had to say about student voice, and I think that can be a really nice conversation with Josh as well, who's our student in the room, but also this moment and how we seize it as universities to actually bring something positive out of this disruptive moment. I am now going to properly introduce Georgie and Josh and then ask them a few questions. So Georgie Harman has significant and broad-ranging leading policy and service delivery experience in the community, public and private sectors. Georgie has been the CEO of Beyond Blue since 2014, where she has led a significant expansion of effort and results in service innovation, suicide prevention and digital solutions. Previously, she helped set up and was the Deputy CEO of the National Mental Health Commission, providing independent advice to government on reform. From 2006 to 2012, Georgie had national responsibility for mental health, suicide prevention, substance misuse, cancer and chronic disease policy and programs as a senior executive at the Commonwealth Department of Health. That all sounds very difficult work, Georgie. She also led the development of a significant whole-of-government mental health budget package and the development of a legislation to introduce plain packaging of tobacco products in Australia. Welcome, Georgie. Josh Yasseri is a mature-aged student doing honours in animation at UTS. Hailing from Wiradjuri country, he is a proud father and Aboriginal artist, following in the footsteps of his mother, Teresa Yasseri, also an Aboriginal artist, and uses his talents to tell stories from First Nations communities and perspectives. During the COVID-19 lockdown, Josh was initially looking forward to remote learning, but found himself trapped in Sydney and isolated from his families, elders and country, more than 6 hours drive away. So welcome, Josh, and I'm looking really forward to hearing your insights as well. So just before I asked Georgie, I realised at the beginning I neglected to say that if any of this content at any time is worrying to you, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed or if it's making you feel anxious, please, firstly, you can turn it off. You don't have to keep watching. Or you can mute it for a little while. But also remember there are people you can talk to, and of course you can always contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. We will be posting those details in the chat box, which you'll be able to find in your Zoom control panel. So please remember that. Look after yourself. Georgie.
Hello.
Hello. Tell us a bit about Beyond Blue. It has a real focus on prevention and early intervention for all people, but particularly for young people. And so tell us a bit about what you do and what early intervention means.
Yeah, sure. Can I just go back though to, I think those data that you started with, Verity, are really important, because what COVID is showing us is the fractures and the fault lines in the system that we have now. And it's not just about the system, it's actually about our society. So income, age, gender, geography, culture, racism, discrimination, loneliness. These are the things that we actually need to now really focus on. And because if we support those facing the greatest adversity, we're all going to do better. So I'm really, really passionate about that. And I think that this crisis gives us greater momentum to do that than ever before, because the data is unequivocal. So what does Beyond Blue do? Look, we're I guess, the best known and most visited mental health organisation in Australia. About 13 million Aussies come to us in some way, shape or form every year. We focus on depression and anxiety, but increasingly suicide prevention as well. We really believe that you have to start early. And as Pat's numbers shown, half of adult mental health conditions start by the age of 14 and 3/4 by the age of 24. So it's very different. So we need to start early in life and also support parents and families. Prevention is about making sure that we increase the protective factors, things like eating well, getting enough sleep, exercising our body and minds, relationships, meaningful activities, connections. And also reducing the risk factors, those things like financial distress and poverty, racism, family violence, drinking too much, insecure housing. Not all mental health conditions are preventable, but many common mental health conditions are. And that's, I really think, where Beyond Blue operates in the space of. So you've got prevention, which we do a lot of. We work in schools, workplaces, communities, clubs, that kind of stuff. But early intervention is the next most important step. And we think about that both in terms of early in life, so intervening early in life, again, supporting healthy childhoods, supporting parents who are, doing it tough. We talk about early intervention being early in illness. So if someone does start to become unwell, how do we actually put the supports around them so that their illness doesn't get worse? And early in episode. So, again, making sure that the deterioration, when someone does, especially when they live with cyclical mental illness, when we get in early where there's an episode of illness, we can actually do better for people. So that's some of the stuff that we do. In the coronavirus period, we were given some money by the feds to set up a national service. We did that in 8 days. We've seen record numbers of people come to us. We've taken a digital first approach to that, but also given a whole range of options to people. Young people are predominantly are the biggest users of that service. And the numbers of young people who've been coming to us in the last 6 months has actually increased quite dramatically. They're coming to us with, firstly, anxiety, secondly, depression. This is in terms of the reasons for contacting us. Isolation, family and relationship problems, and loss. Those are the reasons that they're citing. 900,000 people have been to the digital site. We're seeing 40 to 60% increases in contacts with our counselling service, and that's both phone and web chat. But the most click-through support option for people is peer support. 1.3 million people are going onto our online forums to actually support one another. And the other, quickly, Verity, the last point I wanted to make is this pandemic has forced us to work differently. So we are forming really different partnerships. We're working with Financial Counselling Australia. The amount of financial stress that people are coming to us with, and financial distress and mental distress are the two sides of the same coin. So we've created really strong pathways to financial counsellors who can actually help people manage debt and money worries. We're working with Reach Out and Lifeline so that the content on our service is actually been written for young people by young people. And if a young person is visiting pages on that site that indicate suicidal distress, they get a pop-up intervention from Lifeline to say, hey, we've noticed you're looking at this kind of content. We're a bit worried about you. Do you want to speak by text to a Lifeline counsellor? So we're creating these new pathways into services. And the other thing is, because people are calling us with greater complexity of need, we're working with Mind Australia. And when someone calls our counselling service and they need longer term support, they are provided with up to another 5 sessions with a Mind counsellor, completely free of charge, no barriers to access. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing to work differently to respond to the community's needs at this point.
That use of the digital technology, I think, is fascinating in this space, because presumably that's also about scale, isn't it?
It's about, you know, we're not going to be able to get through this by treating one person at a time, as much as we'd like to. So we have to think about how do we bring together face-to-face services with technology, digital, online. How do we actually achieve the scale that we need to do so that people have a whole range of tools to look after their mental health as well as to recover? So those are the kinds of models I think we need to be really, really, you know, badgering governments and actually doing ourselves without waiting for governments.
So Josh, first, before you even get to speak in real life, we are going to in fact share a short clip, which is from an ABC segment that you spoke to in August, about your experience of lockdown. So we're just going to play a short clip before I ask Josh some questions.
Research has shown well-designed online learning can be just as effective as face-to-face, and actually even better if the two are combined. The problem is there wasn't enough time for this to be well-designed online learning. It was a solution to a situation not seen out of wartime, and the experience of students and teachers reflect that. Josh initially thought it'd be great.
It was great at the beginning. Looking at it now, it's like you'd be able to stay in your pyjamas, go online, like do your own thing, and then switch off.
This is a crime against all Australians, especially white Australians, and that makes it heaps worse.
But the talented Indigenous artist and proud father of one couldn't leave the big city. He missed his traditional spiritual connection to the quieter land 6 hours drive away. He'd never felt so alone.
When I say isolation, I'm looking at my family members that are isolated, my elders, my country. So if for me to go back and be healed by my country, I can't do it.
So expand a little bit on that for us, Josh. How did you find the experience moving to remote learning, and also, I suppose, both the moving to remote learning, but also the isolation of lockdown and so forth this year?
Yeah, like I said in that, I think it's I've had a very unique experience to it. Like I said, it was a good plan straight up at the beginning. Then, like, things happen in the world, because this didn't just happen in a bubble, as we said. This was at a time of George Floyd and everything else that was going on, COVID, switching to. So I was sort of like, I was getting affected from everything that was going on in the world, what was going within inside of myself, with my own past traumas about, growing up in these spaces where they don't expect someone like me to be. I think, yeah, at the beginning it was nice, but as time went by and life hit those punches, you sort of, you're locked in a room because of lockdown, and then, okay, Sydney's a hotspot, so how am I supposed to go back home and, like, that's the community there. I can't, because maybe I did have COVID or something, and then bring that to that community and decimate my whole community. So I couldn't do that. So I'm like, I'm sitting in my room. I'm sort of in depression in myself, being locked, isolated, and it's just, I think I started rolling with the punches then, and because of COVID, it was blowing everything up. So everyone started to look at each other and looking at family, what's important in life and stuff like that. And we've had that time to sit down and look at that. So yeah, it's been a very mixed response to what's going on with the online, education system.
And, with the benefit of, I suppose, of hindsight in a way, even though unfortunately we're not quite through it yet, what would you like to see the university do differently? What would have supported you better and would continue to support you better during all this turbulence?
Like, I can understand that this is all new to everyone. But in saying that, it's like us as students, we're paying so much to have this university experience, but it's sort of like, some of us don't have those computers. Some of us don't have those equipment. And some of the stuff is not set up for people to have working at home online, because you have to physically go in and do your work. So the university wasn't really sort of ready to go online and ready to do what we do. But yeah, so it was about accessibility. It's about the equipment, access to that kind of stuff. And if you can't do that, you can't go to your potential. You're sort of limited, and I think that's sort of like where it starts getting sort of hopeless for them, some of those students and stuff like that.
That's right. I was interested because of one of the things that Patrick said in his speech about the role of student voice and student power, like this idea that, and you can see why that matters in terms of mental health too, because it's about having some sense of agency. How did you find there was a sense of sort of support amongst students?
I guess for the younger ones, they were sort of bouncing off each other and stuff like that. But because I am an Indigenous man, I am older, I've had my own kind of experience of university. So it's sort of like that just referred back into the online world, where it's sort of maybe I'll have the one-off kind of conversation to say, oh, you're right kind of thing. But I guess other students would be who are very social and have those kinds of networks. I guess they were bouncing off each other, but it's sort of the people that fall through these cracks that don't have that support. That's the really ones we got to look after kind of thing. So yeah, it's just a bit that not just only students, but yeah, it's actually like trying to bring up a new community, because like everyone has their own little community and social groups at university, and they're all good like that. But when it starts to come into online, and then you get into these breakout groups and you're with people that you don't really socialize with or want to talk to and stuff like that. So it's no one knows who's with who or what groups with what group and who's working together. It's all like, okay, we're just all numbers, and we'll throw you in there and we'll throw you over there. And it's it's like we're starting to lose that sociology or the community strength together. And it's like, how do we form this digitally.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is a big. So I'd be interested to toss this back now to Patrick and Georgie. These, you know, the creation of community and support and a sense of belonging when you're not actually physically in the same space as each other. Patrick, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, one of our researchers, Professor Mario Alvarez, has developed a platform of care called MOST, Moderated Online Social Therapy, which the Victorian government's rolling out across all youth mental health services, headspaces and state services, you know, in the context of the pandemic, and it addresses a lot of those issues. It produces a community, you know, and it's like a community that you are a member of. You know, so it might be a few hundred young people with a particular type of mental health problem, or a particular setting like a headspace, or could be done in schools as well. But it's a complementary thing to face-to-face, and I think it's dangerous to sort of not respect the importance of the real face-to-face aspect as well. These are not either ors. It's a matter of complementarity and balance, and that's what Mario's platform has been developed to do. And it's powerful because you get peer support built within it. You have peer moderators, you have clinical moderators, you have therapeutic things happening on it. It's very, very powerful. And that's based on 10 years of NHMRC funded research, now being scaled up in the US and other places as well. So that's got great potential. And I think the other thing about the student voice I'd just like to say is that, one of the questions that I just responded to is, why has this been allowed to be neglected by universities? And I said, well, it's not just universities, it's the whole society's neglected mental health. We've had heaps of awareness thanks to Beyond Blue and others over the last 20 years, but we haven't had, real serious policy investment. We've had oases of reform and good things happening in different, especially from the federal government, I would say, over the last 20 years, but state governments have kind of just allowed the whole thing to collapse. So I think, why is that? And it's because the public have not had a voice. The public have not had a voice. The consumer voice in mental health has been weak and fragmented, and we haven't had a grassroots movement. We're setting up an organisation to address that, and that's gaining momentum now. And the students I don't say the students need to do that. If the students were to do that, then you might see some action. If you've got to use the word agency. It's all very well to feel disempowered and miserable and so on, but the way out of that is actually developing and exercising your power and influence, and that can be done at a grassroots level in a very powerful way, and then they can form alliances with other leadership and other stakeholders that want to see the same thing. So this is what we have. Georgie said we've got to do things differently. We've got to all the things she said at the beginning. I totally agree with about the crime, what it's done, what it's exposed, and these are all political questions. It's a political question. Why have the mental health needs of young people been allowed to be neglected? Because no one's actually forced people to address them.
Political questions need political solutions. Georgie, what would you like to add to that?
So look, I think just back to your question, Verity, I think, we're tribal. As human beings, we're tribal and we're social creatures. And all of that has been totally changed overnight, radically, unpredictably, in ways that we never imagined. Loneliness actually is the way that loneliness affects our brain. It actually lights up the same part of our brain that lights up when we feel physical pain. So actually loneliness is painful. So there's some real science behind this, done by much cleverer people than me. But I think I love Josh's point. It's the simple things that actually make the biggest difference. And it's the end user, if you like, that actually often has the solutions. And yet for some reason we forget to ask them what they need and what good looks like. And what can we tweak so that it feels better? It's a better experience. You're going to get more out of it. There's a saying in mental health, nothing about us without us. It's the kind of rallying cry of the consumer movement. And as Pat said, there's a lot of momentum there. We're now finally realizing that the real experts are people who've got the T-shirt. People with lived experience, whether that's from a personal experience or a family experience or a support person experience. So I think it's the simple things. And I think it's asking the questions. It's not just people like Josh holding truth to power. It's actually about us, people in power, asking the right questions.
and including students in the solutions. Yeah, I think that's so important.
Well,
Now,
Verity, can I just say one quick thing about that? I mean,
yeah, go.
the success of the youth mental health reforms has been very dependent on what you just said, that the young people actually having a key role in the whole co-design and development of Headspace and everything else. So what Georgie said is right, but I think there's got to be respect on both sides for expertise, though. Consumers need to respect the professionals and the researchers as well. So it's got to be a two-way street.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot in engagement at university, a sort of mutually beneficial, transformative relationship where we both, but it's, you know, can be complicated. Now, I'm now going to ask some of the questions that are sitting in the chat because I want to give people an opportunity. The first question, partly because it's a bit related to what we've just been talking about, consumer voice, student voice. Amy, and I'm probably not going to pronounce your name properly, Amy. Amy Cifuentes Platts asks, does anybody have any advice on breaking down the stigma around mental health, especially for international students? So I think you talked a bit about it, Patrick, but and I do think it's definitely got better than it used to be. I'm a mother of a teenage daughter. There is no doubt it is more openly discussed in schooling and amongst peer groups than it ever was in my day. But what do we do about that? And that there is an issue in terms of international students who don't necessarily want to go to a counsellor and so forth. And we have that issue at universities. Patrick, do you have any views on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's you know, it's definitely improved a lot with sort of maybe you could say mainstream students, and particularly for common mental disorders, like Georgie said too. But there are still areas where stigma is rampant. I think we had the SANE stigma report card this week, which showed that for more serious and complex mental illnesses, it's really very serious still stigma, and certainly for different communities. And it's not just the students from those communities, it's actually their parents are more of a problem than the students. Because you know, we've seen in Headspace certainly parents trying to stop their kids seeking help because of stigma. You know, the kids are actually trying to seek help, but they're blocked. You know? But it's a massive issue, and it's not a one size fits all. And then I think, as Georgie said, you know, a lot of the kind of divisions and differences have been exposed, really, you know, by the whole crisis as well.
Josh, is there issues with stigma either in your community, or have you felt that amongst student body at UTS?
I think there is a real problem with not doing anything with it. Like everyone can vent to someone, but there's nothing that they've been trained to how to deal with this problem, because all it is a big venting situation where someone will come up and say, you know, I'm dealing with this, blah 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 blah, and then that's it, you know, and they feel good just to have that venting. But if they're sort of trained to understand what's going on with themselves and why they're feeling like this, maybe then they can have these, you know, information to go to. So if they had training at the beginning to say, okay, if you're having these kinds of problems, and it should be a training session, because they need to learn about cultural awareness, you know, for even those Indigenous, international students that are coming through. No one's had training about cultural awareness, you know. So what are we creating? There's training about, you know, sexual assaults and stuff like that, and they have questionnaires and stuff like that. So people are trained, but what happens in that space of these people that are vulnerable? So I think if we sort of have either a little bit of training for people that are coming in, maybe even the staff to actually, you know, identify these things within the classrooms. I don't know if you do have that as is.
We have a bit of, yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about students, because we do mental health first aid training for our staff.
Yeah.
You know, but maybe we're not involving the student population as much in that sort of.
Well, that's the thing. It's like he said, it's a two-way street. So we both need to work. This is a together working situation. It's not just a one side kind of thing. So this person has to seek the help, you know, to be helped. So if they don't know, they're lost.
And their first response, of course, the first response you get when you do seek help is always very important. Georgie, what do you think about stigma?
So look, this is an area that we do a lot of work in, and as Pat said, we've got a long way to go on more severe and complex conditions. But with depression and anxiety, there's been a huge shift in stigma at a societal level, and in some degree at a structural level. But the big stigma problem that we're concerned about is self-stigma now. And if you think about what the definition of stigma is, it's stigmata is a stain on one's character. And that's how people feel about themselves. They feel that there's something wrong with them. They feel that they're weak. They feel that they're a burden to others. And they feel a great sense of self-shame. And that's a major barrier to help seeking, especially with international students. And I think that that's at the heart of Amy's questions. And it's something we see a lot of. The biggest antidote to stigma is putting people that look like you in front of others who look like them, and them telling their story.
Yeah.
That is the most powerful weapon we've got against self-stigma.
Yeah, that's really pertinent. The next, mindful of the time, the next question has got a lot of upvotes, so I want to ask it. It's from Deborah Marsh. She says, do we need to be thinking differently for HDR? So that's higher degree research students, so people doing things like PhDs, versus undergraduate students, or are the issues, needs and solutions very similar? So I might go again. So I know I keep going first to Patrick, but it's mainly because I know he's done the report about university. Was there recommendations in there about the particular stresses of HDR students, or was that?
I could take that on notice, Verity. I'm sorry, I can't remember that. Actually, Penny Carlson was the person really leading that whole project, but I've been involved, but I can't really answer that specifically. But I think, obviously, you know, we have a lot of HDR students at Origin, and you know, there are different stresses and different threats to their mental health. Absolutely, they've got different needs. They're usually older, you know, obviously, and so there are definitely different issues, and it's a highly stressful thing doing a PhD, having done one. You know, it's probably one of the most stressful things you're actually going to do in your life.
Yeah,
and especially current conditions. You know, the kind of environment for higher education. It must be the worst period that I can remember, actually. You know, that we're going through right now. So there's that a general effect, but then there's more specific things too. And also some of the career pathways that would have been open to people are sort of, they're very unstable, aren't they? And huge uncertainty, which is one of the big things about this stage of life, the increasing instability and uncertainty of it for the young people.
Yeah. What the I'm going to ask, I'm just going to quickly make a comment, because Helena Asher Chiang talks about requiring academic staff to do mental health training. We do it at UTS, but we don't require it. It's not mandatory, but that's interesting as an idea. And she also says she has had Batia, which is the student run or student peer networking, come in and run sessions with her students, and that's always been highly received. So that's good. Again, we're at 5-1, but I want to ask this final question from Paul Byron. So he's a UTS researcher, and he's researching digital support amongst LGBTIQ plus young people, and he's still hearing stories of mainstream mental health services providing inadequate support to LGBTQ plus young people, particularly trans and gender diverse folk. I'm wondering if panelists might speak to how particular groups of young people face greater obstacles. Example, common experiences of racism, homophobia, transphobia when accessing professional support, and currently supported by major mental health organisations in Australia, and how this might be improved. Georgie, do you have any views on that?
Oh, I've got some very strong views on this as a member of that community, and as someone who's kind of involved in the community. Look, it's an interesting thing. You're absolutely right, Paul. There are many mainstream organisations that need to be that need to really lift their game in terms of competency and an appropriateness of how they deliver services, especially to gender diverse and gender questioning and trans young people. And it's not about just putting a rainbow flag in the window. You know, there really are some important skills here. And there's some great organisations that actually teach those skills. So Beyond Blue, it's something we take very seriously. All of our counsellors go through special training. We know that there's actually quite a significant number of LGBTIQ community members that use our services. We know generally that LGBTI communities want to use specialist and LGBTI endorsed services, but actually a great proportion actually are quite comfortable with mainstream services, as long as their experience feels respectful and is appropriate. So it's about lifting the bar for everyone. But there are some great organisations out there, the LGBTI Health Alliance, Switchboard here in Victoria, that are really pushing this as an issue at the moment. It is still one from a policy perspective that keeps getting overlooked. But you know, this is a group of this is a part of our community that is at higher risk of suicide than, apart from Indigenous Australians, than any other group in the community, and especially trans people.
Yes, yes. So the final question that I'm going to let you have a little bit of words on, it's from Janelle Spate. She's just seeing the urgency. And so I suppose her question is fundamentally, I see it in my family, I see it in my volunteer work. How do we get government to take urgent action? And how do we make the message clear that this is an illness that can be cured? You know, that this is the way we can help people. So I suppose if you've got any last minute thoughts about the call to action and how we do that, or anything else you want to say, I'll start with you, Josh. Any last minute thoughts?
I wouldn't know how to answer that question. Like, to me, I think it's got to do more with people knowing where they can go. Like for Indigenous people, we're not looking at government to save us. That's how we see it. So it's sort of, how do we strengthen ourselves? You know, because that's, at the end of the day, we can only save ourselves, really. So for that question, I don't know how to answer that with like government and politics and stuff like that. So I'll leave that to the experts.
Yeah. But what you're saying is your community bands together.
Well, that's it. It's a community. We are community people. So it's like we not only do we have one mother, you know, we our kinships. This is all community based of Indigenous people. And like with the question from before, like I tell you, for Indigenous people, if it wasn't for Jumbana, I wouldn't have went to UTS, because of the support that they have, the spaces that they have for Indigenous people. That's the support that, you know, maybe that community needs, you know, with the LBG. So like that they could use that as the framework of what Indigenous people do. And yeah, to create those spaces, because without that support, I don't think I could do what I do, be who I am, you know, without it. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Josh. I hope there's some Jumbana people on the line who've heard you say that. That's great. Georgie, what's your carrying call for action?
So we're waiting on the Productivity Commission report. It's about the 20th report we've had into mental health in the last, I don't know how many years. There has to be something that's done, and I think generally governments know that. It's how they go about making the changes that and actually working together. The most important thing is that we want the Commonwealth to do stuff. We actually need the states and territories to be working with the Commonwealth to do a lot more. And it's that working together and this redesigning a system so it actually works for people. People don't care who funds which bit. They just want to get a service that works for them. So for me, the biggest piece is about, yes, of course we want more money, but the more important bit for me right now is actually governments redesigning a system together with us, with community, with people and families. And I think, you know, Josh made a beautiful point. It's not just governments that actually hold the solutions. It's us. It's the communities that we work, live and play in, and that find nourishment in. So I think, you know, governments have absolutely got to step up and do their part, but we've also all got to do our part too.
Yeah. Yeah, and universities have to do their part with or without government support.
Absolutely, yeah.
Patrick, you get the last word.
I just agree 110% with what Josh and Georgie said. I mean, but I think there's a link between the two. If the community organises and understands what it needs, and it can definitely do a lot of those things within its own resources and its own kind of, and every community is like that. You know, I'm from an Irish family. You know, community and family and all of those sort of structures are incredibly important. We've lost them from most cultures, though. You know, they've been degraded in many cultures. So reviving that would be really good. But then mobilising that in a political sense, because I do think we have leadership at the moment. The Prime Minister, current Prime Minister, the current Premier in Victoria. I've been involved with the Royal Commission. There's huge effort going into what Georgie just described, of redesigning the system so it actually works for people in a very different way from the way it has been operating. So I think we've got a huge opportunity, but the sympathetic politicians only move as fast as the community creates the expectation and pressure for. And that's what the community has kind of failed. It's the wider Australian community have actually failed, I think, so far. And we're all responsible for that because we actually been bought off with, soft solutions and kind of just being patted on the head and said, well, you're more understanding and more aware, but we're not actually going to provide the services because currently the services are only provided to a minority of people who need them, and the quality of the services that are provided are substandard. We wouldn't tolerate that if that was happening in asthma or diabetes or any other health area, but we've tolerated in mental health. So we've got to take some responsibility and not just always blame the politicians, because they'll only be able to be empowered to act as much as we kind of expect. So we've got to wake up, and students have got a role to play. Students are always the activists. They're always the young people are the ones that fight the battles. Like you can see that with climate change. Why aren't we, as students, fighting this battle on our own? It's our own self-interest as well as the altruistic part.
Well, on that call, that's a bit of a call to all of us to up our game. So thank you very much for that, Patrick. Thank you, Georgie. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for being a part of this panel today. And thank you to all of the audience who joined. There is still a multitude of questions in the Q&A, so I apologise that we haven't got to those questions, but it was a really stimulating discussion. It's definitely given me a lot to think about, particularly in relation to the university and how we support our young people. So thank you all for attending today. As usual, this will be recorded and the recording will be made available. I noticed somebody else has also requested a copy of Patrick's slides. I don't know whether they're available, Patrick.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We will organise also providing a copy of Patrick's slides to anyone who's interested. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks again for your time, panellists, and we'll see you all soon.